able to access this on our YouTube channel. And hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Jessie. I'm on the WATESOL board, and I'm just here today to introduce our two presenters. We're here with Chris Soholt and Yu Bai from Northern Virginia Community College. And they're here to do a workshop on improving the quality of education through open educational resources. So I'll hand it over to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.
Our take on this is you and I developed a handbook for our intermediate level composition classes at Northern Virginia Community College. And so we began with the idea of why should we develop one of these things? And the first one, of course, is to reduce cost for students. We are, in fact, mandated at NOVA, Northern Virginia Community College, to find ways to lower textbook costs for students. And so developing a handbook and making it readily available for free to students is our primary, or at least certainly first, reason behind developing this handbook. And the other thing we noticed, particularly about writing textbooks, in trying to select them, is that most writing textbooks on the market are designed to be used over a great deal of time. And our courses are 1 semester long, and there is a serious gap, not a gap, but a very great difference in skill and in content that we cover from one level to another. And so where we would be teaching exclusively paragraphs at one level, we would go immediately to essay at the next level. And not a lot of books do that in a single book. So we have designed a book that, in fact, is related to what we teach. It meets our needs for our particular class. And the other thing is in this OER environment, we realize that we are not sitting on a static product, but rather we have something that can evolve. And you and I have agreed that, of course, we're not looking at our final product. And one of the things we want to take into account in our evolution and our revision of the product itself is that we want to get student feedback. And so we've had student feedback, and it's informs what we do. So do you want to tell them what the handbook looks like?
Yeah. So to take a look at the handbook, there are 5 chapters in the handbook. The first chapter is about is a grammar review. So we have included the grammar points that we feel most important to the ESL students at this level. And some of the grammar points are their weak areas, such as subject-verb agreement, articles, like a complex compound, how to write the sentence structure. So in this chapter, we have included subject verbs, independent clause, dependent clause, sentence types. We want to teach them how to construct correct, simple, compound, and complex sentences. And we try to help them identify common sentence errors, like especially fragments and run-ons. And also the parts of speech, we think it's really important for them to know. So we try to target their weaknesses, especially at this level. And in the second chapter, we introduce academic essay organization. As Chris said earlier, at this level, students start to learn how to write essays. So in the previous level, they learn how to write paragraphs. Now this is a kind of a big leap to write academic essays. So we want to help them to build a solid foundation before they move on. So we introduce the structure of an academic essay, and then we teach hook techniques and how to write a good thesis statement, how to write topic sentences, and how to how to provide relevant evidence. So their essay can be coherent and they can stay on focus, stay on the topic. And as you can see, there is a chart, and I'm sorry, the font is a little bit small. So on the left, you see this is the structure for a paragraph, and they can convert this, the structure is pretty similar. They can convert into an essay structure. So we focus on 5 paragraphs structure: the introduction, the 3 body paragraphs, and the conclusion. And we use color coding a lot to help them identify the, for example, the topic sentences, the evidence, and the conclusion, and so on. And we also ask the students to do color coding to analyze, and also to when they write their own essay. And then the third chapter is about a classification essay. So in this class, we teach 3 types of essays: classification, comparison, contrast, and cause effect. And each of these chapters, chapters 3, 4, and 5, they all follow the same structure. So we first start with the essay organization. We teach them how a classification essay is organized. And then we provide a sample essay for them to use color code to analyze, to identify hook, thesis, topic sentence, evidence, concluding sentence, conclusion, and so on. And then we also help them to learn how to use, how to start the essay with the brainstorming and then have an outline. So how to write an outline for this type of essay. And then we provide language and grammar for classification essay, like how to use correct transition words and how to use vocabulary. And the last section is the writing exercises. So we provide them like topics, and they can practice writing. I see Patrick has the hands up. So
yes.
Patrick, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just missed what you said in the very beginning of this slide about what types of essays you have them write. I think one was maybe comparative.
Yeah, so the first type is classification.
Oh, this is the first type.
Yes, this is the first type.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this is the first one. The second type is a comparison contrast. And as you can see, the structure is the same. The organization, the sample essay, outline, practice grammar and the language, and then practice writing. But for comparison contrast, we teach 2 structure, like 2, one is the 2 methods. The first is block, and the second is point by point. But we do put focus on point by point, but maybe different professors have different approach. But in my class, I focus on point by point. And then the third type of essay is cause effect. And again, the same structure: organization, sample, outline, language grammar, and writing exercises. And then after the 5 chapters, we provide appendixes. And the one beauty of OER is that we can keep adding and changing a lot of things. So right now we have 4 appendices. The first is we provide many writing topics for instructors, so they can use the topics to help the students practice the essay. And the second appendix is grammar exams, and some of the exams we developed by the professors themselves. So we use them for instructors to give the students to practice. And so some of the exams we can use for like a midterm or final. And the third appendix is writing and grammar resources. So this one is ongoing. We are trying to add more and more for students to look at the resources and the practice. And then we include the student essays. So we first get the consent from our students. So after they finish the class, if they agree to for us to use their essays, we use their essays without giving the names. It's anonymous. So other students can look at their peers' essays and to practice peer review. So now, Chris.
Well, on that note, we've also begun to pilot this text, and we've obviously asked our students what they think of it, and it's generally been positive feedback. Mostly along the lines of it gets right to the point, and they don't find a lot of extraneous pages and exercises that are sometimes packed into other writing books that may serve a purpose, but don't fit into a 15-week term, and so that we're able to get them right to what they want from a book. Now, we've also received some, we'll say negative feedback, but points that we don't have enough grammar practice yet. And I believe you and I both agree that we need to put in more grammar practice. We have the points made in the pages, but we don't have as much practice as students at this level need. And they do need a great deal of practice. And so what we're going to do with it is we've already piloted it, but then COVID hit. And so we've had a little bit of a tricky time getting it out and using it. So I'm going to be using it in the summer, and it's not to bore you, but we're going to continue to work on it. We're going to be building it and revising what we've got. But our goal is to get it into all of our sections in our campus of what we call ESL 41, which is an intermediate composition class for ESL students. And then our goal at Loudoun campus is to drop our current grammar book, further lowering the costs for our students in their textbooks. So these are what our plans for the future are. And we'd like to think that this project has application beyond our campus only. So we'd like to, you and I are looking at doing other handbooks for other courses, perhaps completely leaving textbooks behind, as it were. And we do like the idea of student feedback. And so I plan on giving my students more than one opportunity this coming summer and fall semester to tell me what they think, pro and con, positive and negative about it. And again, going back to it, this is not a finished product. We'd like to continue to make it, in fact, better. So what we're going to do now, we were told that this was workshop, and so we're going to make you work. But since we've got such a small group, I wonder if it wouldn't behoove us just to make you one breakout room. We're going to have you do, we're going to try and have you do 3 different exercises that we have our students do. One of them is about writing the introductory paragraph for an academic essay. And I think those of us who've taught composition can all agree that can be one of the most challenging paragraphs for a student to write. I mean, a thesis statement can be fairly formulaic at this level, but it's very hard to get a student to write, and I'm going to use the word hook. I don't love that word because most textbooks teach hook as the first line of a sentence, the first line of a paragraph, introduction. But I don't want my students to think of it as, I need to write something that's going to make my reader say, oh my God, because they won't. They don't have first of all, the linguistic capacity to write a sentence profound enough to make an academic reader say, oh my. And secondly, I want them to think of their introductory paragraph not as a 3-part process, hook, middle part, and thesis, but rather think of it as leading the reader from your first sentence to your thesis statement and make it logical. So in my classes and in our classes, we teach 6 types of hooks, and we've got a document that we can show you about all the 6 types. And rather, the question in the chat is open for changes and adaptations or open. Well, it's open to use by other instructors right now, and we welcome feedback. But right now, it's kind of the proprietary property of Nova. We're kind of sort of bound by that right now, but our goal is to perhaps make it far more available than it is now. I hope that answers your question, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No worries.
I wasn't sure, just in terms, because there was a bunch of TESOL conversation about this at the convention. I just wasn't exactly sure as a topic or as a category, whether that open meant this idea of flexibility and adaptability, or whether open meant that all of a sudden we were creating this broad, non-textbook based resource for other teachers. And I just didn't know how it was oriented.
I think both of those definitions fit. I think our purpose is right now to try and relieve the burden from our students of having to pay exorbitant prices for textbooks, and to have something that we can share among our faculty and be able to take feedback from them and suggestions and put them in. And as we're running right now, via Canvas, you know, we can all create different activities that could piggyback along with it. So I think maybe towards open for our students right now rather than open for the world. But anyway, what we want to do is we want to put you into a room and have you take a look at, first of all, the techniques for the hooks. And everybody recognizes these. And I'm not going to try and teach you as teachers what a lead for an academic essay is, but I teach all 6 of these. And actually, I try to keep my students from asking questions in their openings, because questions are frequently at this level either incredibly mundane, like why is there air, or incredibly personal and specific, like have you ever thought about driving down the Beltway at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with an almost flat tire on a hot summer day and not getting to the Legion Bridge on time? So I try to make them avoid questions if possible. And I also try to make them avoid quotations, because they'll go to you know, what is it, Bartlett's Online, they'll pick a quote and then they'll write something completely unrelated to it. But the fact is all of these 6 techniques can be employed. And so what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to give you 6 introductory paragraphs that illustrate each of these 6 types of introductory paragraphs, and ask you to identify what the primary technique that is used. And now I didn't put this on, we didn't put this on the slide, but I usually teach that there's a 7th technique, and the 7th technique is in fact a combination of these things, because I try to teach my students, we try to teach our students, that an introductory paragraph isn't cookie cut out of some mold, but rather it's written. And so a combination of techniques makes for a good intro paragraph. So are you going to throw everybody into their rooms, or everybody, throw our 3 guests into their rooms?
Yeah, I just want to add
oh yes, please, sorry.
One thing to what Chris has said, because in my experience, the introduction is really challenging for the students. So after they think about the thesis, they always tell me, I don't know how to start my essay. So we think it's nice to provide some techniques for them and to provide some samples for them to look at, so they have some ideas. And many times I tell my students, you can start the body paragraphs, because after you have a thesis, you can write the body paragraphs, and later you can come back to apply the techniques to write your hook. And some professors say use a hook, background information, and a thesis. So there are different approaches. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy these techniques into the Google Docs. First of all, let me copy paste the Google Docs link in the chat box. So please see if you can access this document.
Please tell me that you can.
Yeah, so I have pasted the link in the chat box, and I'm going to also copy paste this slide into the chat box, so you can practice when you do the activity, you can refer back to this part. So are you able to access the Google Docs?
Yes, but I don't think we have the edit access.
So yeah, you cannot edit, but you can download. Can you download and then you can open on your own computer?
Yes.
Okay, so let me add these descriptions. So this maybe you don't need it, but in case you want to refer to this, yeah.
I have my students doing this particular exercise. I tell them to look for the primary technique from each of these introductory paragraphs, but I also ask them if they can find other hints of other techniques used in them, because I do again believe that number 7, which was not on the slide, is the most important, and that is the combination. So.
Yeah, so I'm sharing my screen of the Google Docs. So you see the descriptions of the 6 techniques, and then there are 6 introductions, and you can, since we only have 3, we will create only 1 breakout room, right, Chris?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
And we could, I suppose we could join, but.
How about Jesse? I don't know if you want to join the breakout or.
Sure, yeah, either way.
So in that case, I can create 2 breakout rooms, right? So, and you can discuss in your group which techniques each introduction paragraph uses, and then we'll come back together to talk about these. Okay, so let's maybe take 5 minutes for the breakout activity, and we'll come back after 5 minutes. And I'll assign the groups randomly.
I don't think you'll be able to assign me as the host, but you can tell me what group you want me to join.
Oh, I see. Can you please join room 1? And somehow when I randomly create things in room 1, so how can I remove? Chris, maybe you can leave the breakout room after.
Yeah, I can leave. I can remove myself.
Okay, so Jesse, can you please join room 1?
I'm still here.
Oh, actually, you just don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I just clicked not now.
Yes. Okay. Great. So
we're at 25 minutes according to me.
25. You mean right now it's 3:27, right? So bring them back at 3:32.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, and I meant we're about 25 minutes into our presentation. We've been going for 25 minutes.
Longer than we planned, right?
Well, yeah, a little bit, but I don't think we're in any kind of danger.
Right. So
I don't think we're going to have any problem with a short discussion after this. I think the discussion will be short.
Yeah, because we only have a very 4, including Jesse. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
I'm kind of surprised because 11 people registered, but only 3 joined.
Part of me is wondering whether they had to pay, because usually when you go to conferences, you have to pay.
I don't think they have to pay.
Yeah, I bet they didn't. No.
No. Yeah.
I was going to invite people, but then I thought they had to pay.
I don't know if they need to, but my impression is this is free for them to join. They just need to register.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me check the time. So when they come back, we can have the discussion.
Yeah, we'll just see what they say, and then maybe point out some of the places where you might get fooled, you know, tricked or whatever. This looks like this, but it really is this kind of thing. Yeah, like you and I did rehearsing. But I think we're doing fine.
Yeah, I think maybe we will finish before 4.
Yeah, I think we will, and I think we'll be able to again have the discussion and then introduce the next. I can give a little bit more background on how I teach conclusion, or how we teach conclusions. I'm sorry.
And I'm glad that Natalia joined.
I know, it's great. I saw it and I was like, oh my goodness.
I'm really glad to see our colleague.
Yeah, like I said, I was going to invite people, but then I thought, man, I don't want to make everybody, you got to register and then maybe pay. I don't know. Or if you're a member of WATESOL, I bet you don't have to pay. I bet you if you're a
Oh, yeah.
a member,
A
like
member.
I would have to pay if I wanted to attend.
Oh, yeah, it is for, yeah, so it is free for members only. Yeah. And I think it's nice. I hope after the activity, we will have some discussions.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And thank you for bringing up the introductory paragraph being difficult to write, and how I didn't know this, but you teach your students the same way I do. Write your thesis and write your body paragraphs first, and then come back and write your hook. Because in my way of grading, you would only lose a couple points for not having a hook, but you'll lose 10 points if your thesis statement's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll lose, a lot more points if your topic sentences aren't adequate than you will if you just don't write a hook.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes they are stuck in the hook or for a long time. So I told them you can move on, and also conclusion is really challenging for them too.
But the conclusion is 3/4 written though. The toughest part of the conclusion is just the final thought. The conclusion, I actually tell them, conclusions are a little easier to write because you're regurgitating, your thesis and your topic sentences somehow into the concluding paragraph. So the only and if you do it right, you refer to your hook. But the only thing that you got to think about is that final thought. That's the last. Thought,
yeah.
So.
Because they tend to repeat what they have said in the thesis and in the introduction. They even tend to use the same words.
Same words. Yeah. Same words. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, especially on in-class essays, I tell them, so write your thesis and go. Come back and write, and you can even write most of a conclusion and then come back and write a hook.
Right.
All right, so we're at the time, right?
You think 5 minutes is good, right? So I'm going to.
I think so. I think they're gonna, and again, we can extend the discussion time, right?
Okay, so I'm going to send a broadcast message to say we are coming back in 1 minute.
Okay.
And I think when I click on the close all rooms, they have 1 minute to come.
They have 1 minute, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I've set mine for 30 seconds, but yeah, one minute is the original.
This is the default. I didn't change it, but I'm glad that Jesse also has set up as 1 minute. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So they can still wrap up. Let me share my screen of the Google Docs, and then we can talk about these.
Yeah.
I don't know if they also use a similar approach, or they have some different thoughts. Do you see my shared screen, Chris?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
I got you shared. The font is a little small, but that's because probably the view I'm using. And I know the intros, so I'm not worried about
the font. Okay.
It's not that bad. It depends.
I can zoom it to make it. Now it's better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, great.
Love it. Jesse's immediately taken over upon rejoining the meeting. I got to flash the note that says Jesse Ebersol is now the host.
it just does that automatically.
The boss has returned.
Welcome back, everyone.
So what we want is just to hear what technique you think dominates each of these introductory paragraphs, and I think the first one is pretty clear. I mean, that's a quotation hook, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've had students point out to me that there is a touch of an idea of an anecdote there, because it sort of sounds like a little story, because it's, oh, and my visit, but I would agree with them. And I always mention that the best introductory paragraphs are combinations of these techniques. And by the way, when I teach these, I don't pay so much attention to the thesis statements. These are not always great thesis statements, and they're not the types of essays that we teach. So this exercise is strictly for getting to write an introductory paragraph, techniques that can be used. So some of these thesis statements are, I'm going to use a kid word, they're kind of whack. They're not great. So what about the second one? Anybody?
Well, we had a little discussion in our group. It looked like there's a switch in here, but we weren't 100% positive, right? But it looks like it starts with basically disease as a killer of children, and then it goes to car accidents, and then really to the car seat, the seat belts or restraints, right? So there's basically a switch from what used to be a killer to the true topic of the essay.
And I would agree with you there. However, when I teach a hook as a switch, the switch leads to the thesis idea. And the thesis idea of this paragraph or this essay would be the lack of parental restraint on the children. So what the however is doing in this paragraph is changing from past ways children died to, all right, we've gotten rid of that, and then introduces a whole new way that children are dying. So this, to my way of looking at it, fits more under facts and figures and background information. It has an element of a switch, but the switch doesn't lead to the thesis idea. The switch just changes topics in the middle. So that's why I always tell my students, use a combination. Does that make sense? It's got elements of a switch, but it's more facts and figures because it's telling you how these different things happen. So
absolutely.
I mean, that's
absolutely.
Pardon?
Absolutely.
That's how I would make the explanation to my students anyway. Yeah. Number 3 often provokes discussion too.
So if we, when I did this exercise, I had the same feeling. I told Chris this is a switch, and he explained it to me, and I feel like, and then I asked him, so if I want to make this primary technique to be switch, so for my hook, should I say, it's a common feeling that the parents always protect their children. And then the thesis idea is that, however, that sometimes parents are not so careful. So if we switch the hook to something else, then maybe that will make switch the primary technique.
If we switch the first sentence, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you switched it like you said, parents are responsible for caring for their children, right? They clothe them, they bathe them, they feed them, they provide them shelter, right? This is almost a human imperative. However, these days there is, all right, a disturbing aspect of parental care that is lacking. And that would, to me, be more of a switch type of a hook, because then you're switching to the idea of now my parents are not doing such a good job. So yeah. Anyway.
I think it's through these dialogues and the practices, students can understand better. And I think as a teacher, we welcome feedback from the students, and then we can practice in various ways to help them understand what technique they can use and how to identify. Yeah.
Anybody have a strong feeling about 3?
I thought this was an anecdote. I didn't see necessarily a change in direction there.
Well, okay, so when I teach anecdote, I teach it as a snapshot. So
larger.
So in this case, all right, I thought everything was fine. However, when I got back to school, I discovered things weren't fine. So this one I would teach as a switch, because the main idea is I don't know how to do things that I used to be able to do when I was a student. But when I went back to school, I was confident. And so, however, when I got there, I couldn't do these things. So that's the argument I would make to my students. And that's why I would say that it has an element of an anecdote, because it starts back in my day when that's got the storytelling side of things. But I would tell my students that this is more of a switch, because the switch leads into the thesis idea. I thought I was prepared, however, I wasn't. I know I love doing this with my students because it makes them think.
So in this situation, if your students were arguing with you that, no, this is still an anecdote, would you accept that as long as they saw that it was more of a switch?
Sure, because I would say that the one technique that we didn't put into our slide was number 7, which is a combination. So that's what I tell them. I said a good introductory paragraph is not from a cookie cutter. You write them. And of course I would accept that it's got element of anecdote. Absolutely. And that's what makes it a good introduction, is because it's not just, candy or cookie cutter, ABC. It works very well. Number 4 is a fun one. What's number 4? How many of you, when you taught composition, taught your students to write a funnel? You ever heard of the funnel introduction?
Yes, that's the one, from general to specific. I think that's...
Yeah, but the problem with students at this level is they say, oh, I'm going to write about comparing a dish from my country and a dish from the United States. And so you need to go general to specific. So their first sentence is, everybody in the world needs to eat, which is far too general. And then they get down to, there are 3 basic differences between jambalaya and feijoada. And they try to do that in 5 sentences. But if you look at this introduction, the topic of the first, and this is how I teach it, the topic of the first sentence is diets. The topic of the second sentence is miracle diets. And all miracle diets are diets, but not all diets are miracle diets. The third sentence, the topic is fad diets. All fad diets promise miracles, but not all miracle diets are fad diets. Then we get into the specific. It's the Palm Beach diet. So each one of these is still discussing diets. We're not going to start with Americans are fat and then try to write down into the thesis statement about the Palm Beach diet being impractical. So I think this is a good funnel, because it starts general, but not so general that you have to try and go from the sky to your thesis statement in 5 sentences. So does that make sense? Can everybody see the progression? Because that's how I will teach it. I'll draw the funnel and I'll say, what's the topic of the first sentence? What's the topic of the second sentence? And then we get closer and closer to the middle, and everybody says, oh. And finally, it's the Palm Beach diet is impractical for 3 different reasons. And even then, each sentence connects to the one prior in idea.
So for you, when you're teaching funnel, are you usually or always saying, incremental funnel, not just big to small equals funnel?
I draw the funnel on the board and I write 4 lines on it, and we write the topic of each sentence from this paragraph. And I show them how that it steps down a step at a time. I tell them you can't get from everybody needs to eat to there are 3 differences between feijoada and arroz con pollo. I mean, you just can't. There's no way to get there in 5 sentences. Number 5.
A question.
Yeah, but notice it's a series of questions. It's not just a single question. It's a series of questions. I tell my students, if you want to write a question introduction, do it, and then wait 500 essays, and then try again, because that's about how many you're going to need before you're going to get good at it. But a series of questions is better than one question. So yeah, this is a question. And the final one. So when I say that an anecdote is a snapshot, This is a snapshot of the little girl getting dropped off on the church steps. And then it leads us to the thesis statement. So this is what I would call an anecdote. And also it has the sentence before thesis statement, gives you a little facts and figures. Thousands of cases, all right, that occur annually. So if I compare 3 and 6, and Patrick, to your question about anecdote, when we get to 6, I asked my students, can you see the difference between the story in 6 versus the 2 sentences of remembrance in number 3, where, you know, when I went back to school. So it's different from one another.
So you ask your students to compare these 2.
I ask them to look at these 2 and say, which one looks more like a story, looks more like a snapshot. Anyway, so this is one thing that, I mean, again, we're gonna ask you to do another activity, but this is one of the early activities that I do with my classes, because I go back to, as we use this book, go back to, you got to write an introduction. You got to write an introduction, and you need to write it so that it leads your reader logically to your thesis. Thanks for playing.
So do you use other strategies to teach hook and how to write an introduction? Because I feel I find my students, the introduction is really challenging for my students. So I have learned from these techniques, but I just wonder if someone uses different strategies to teach introduction.
It is very challenging, and not just for students, because I worked as a writer for 10 years, and my colleagues and I, you know, the lead is always the hardest to write. I often ask students to think, why did you choose this topic? If you chose this topic, it has some relevance to your life. So think about something that happened to you. So I kind of help, I try to talk them through to the hook based on some things that happened to them and so on. But it's still a challenge, and especially in Zoom classes, it's more difficult than, let's say, in a face-to-face class. But I found that this question, you know, why did you choose this topic? It gets them thinking, and they can possibly come to the hook from that.
Well, now, when we teach the essay based on this book, based on that diagram that you saw in the early pages, or in the early slides, pardon me. Don't worry, flash back to it. The paragraph to essay slide where they put the 2 side by side. When I teach this, I tell my students that everything in the middle, all 3 of the body paragraphs, are going to resemble the paragraph on the left, because they're all going to have topic sentence, major point, minor point, concluding sentence. I tell them that the introductory and the concluding paragraphs are completely different structured from those, and they have more in common with one another than the 3 in the middle. And so another thing that I want my students to do, and when I've taught this, I ask them to do, is to look for the relationships and to write relationships between their introductory paragraphs and their concluding paragraphs. So to write a concluding paragraph, I teach them 4 verbs: reflect, restate, summarize, and end. And so I teach them to reflect on the hook, to restate their thesis idea, to summarize the points of their body paragraphs, and to end with an interesting thought. And so if I could take over sharing.
Okay.
I'm going to share, oops.
And I really like what Natalia said about purpose, right? Purpose and audience. So based on the purpose, I think they can focus more on their the main idea, so they can from the purpose, they can construct their introduction from there. I think the purpose is really important thing to consider.
I agree. I just mixed up. I'm going to stop sharing and go back and share again. Sorry about that. Having a nervous Zoom day. There we are. Okay, so I give them this exercise to get the idea of, and I'm not going to share it as a whole slide just because it's easier for me to work at it here. But I tell them that you have to do these 4 things. And so what I would do is I would show them that this right here represented a reflection. So this is the hook, sorry, and this is the thesis statement. And these are the topics of the body paragraphs. And so I would show them this, and then I'd say, now look at this. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I would show them that this concluding paragraph would look like color-coded like this. No, not yellow, green. Come on. Sorry about this. This is me not playing along with, and we'll do that. And then I would give them this and call it the E. So I would, can everybody still see what I'm sharing? I'm sorry. I'm bouncing around like a spastic 3-year-old. Jesse's agreeing. She's like, yes, you are. I'm not worried about it at all. I have no, all right. So, and I'm sorry, I should have left, I should have left this unhighlighted, my mistake, there. And I would say, if you look at the relationship between the yellows, you'll see that the concluding paragraph refers back to your hook. Don't write a great hook and then, oh my gosh, forget about it in your conclusion. You spent all that time, this challenging paragraph, remind the reader that you've got, all right, a hook. The whole red, this is the thesis statement, and the red here is thesis statement. I'm seeing things in my chat. I'll get to the chat in a second. So that's the restate. The green is summarizing. You summarize the points from your body paragraphs. And then the blue is end. And we always tell our students to try and end with an interesting thought. At least I do when I teach. And remember, this is intermediate ESL composition. These aren't sophisticated. They may have sophisticated thinking, but they don't have sophisticated linguistic or writing skills in English, sorry. So we try to make it simple. So does everyone see that? That is the approach that I take to those 2 paragraphs, introduction and conclusion paragraphs. They're going to resemble each other much more than the 3 body paragraphs are. The 3 body paragraphs are going to be little, right, mirrors of one another. Topic sentence, major points, minor support, all right, concluding sentence. But an introduction and a conclusion have a connection as well. And I think that if the students think about writing these connections, that they'll write better concluding paragraphs. So let me check the chat. I saw something come up, hang on.
So did you say reflect on the hook?
Yeah, reflect on the hook. So look back at the hook. Look back at the hook. Now we were gonna have you do.
Actually, Chris, I think maybe we'll skip the.
Yeah, we're gonna skip this one. Absolutely.
And then we can skip. I'm going to copy paste another Google Docs link in the chat box. And so we planned for 2 activities for you, but I think because we are running short of time. So do you think I talk too much? So Chris, do you think we can move on to slide?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Move on. Let me stop sharing.
You can still share because for the last one, you can still color code, the last one, the major, minor supporting details. Yeah.
All right.
So I posted another Google Docs link in the chat box. And if you click on that link, there are 2 activities. If you like to do the activities, please feel free to do, and we can discuss. So on the first page of our slides, there are our emails, and we'll forward the slides to Jessie. If you like, she can send the slides to you. Yeah. All right, Chris.
So what we've got is now, again, I'm a big fan of color coding because students, some students are visual learners. This is basically outlining in situ. All right. So what I ask them to do now is I say, okay, here's your topic sentence, and I'm using an essay on point-by-point compare and contrast. I say, here's your topic sentence, and here's your concluding sentence. And what I'd like you to do is to identify the major points and the minor points for this paragraph. Now, this is, again, very structured, and it's almost artificially structured. And students, especially at this level, get stuck on the structure. But I think they need to understand that there is a dividing line, a specificity difference between major and minor points. And so if I was to look at this paragraph and say, well, how many major points are there and what are the minor points for each one? I might get a couple of different answers, but this is a point-by-point compare and contrast body paragraph, sometimes known as AB. And so just looking at it, where would you all say that the first major point was, or what was it? And I would tell my students that here is my first major point, right? Because they're both large. That's my comparison point, my point of comparison. And then I would say that it encompasses half the continent. And then I'd say my minor points would be these here, because they all relate to the size of the country itself. And of course, then you can look down and see that, oops, I went a little too far. Mistake. Still the spastic 3-year-old here.
How'd you characterize your red again?
Topic sentence.
Okay, and the conclusion. Okay.
Concluding sentence, yeah. So then you can argue that these two go together as green if you wanted to, or you could just say that the green just goes here because why the United States is just point B. What am I doing? Trying to find, there we go, color and green. And that we could look right here and we would have our blue. And so the students can get an idea of what a paragraph looks like. And it also helps teaching balance. So anyway, this is a sample from our textbook. And to close out, I think I'll let you finish up for us if you would. I'm going to go ahead and stop to share. Are there any questions about, this is just a technique and it can be used with any type of essay or paragraph. So I don't want to go over time. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and say thank you and then allow my colleague to.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So you would use the coloring to demonstrate and to point to so that they can see it, or would you have them also do that when they are writing and showing?
I would not have them do that with their own work necessarily, but I would certainly give them models for which they can use to do it. They can do it with. Yeah, I would say that if you wanted to do it with your own work, do it with your own work and see, and then have somebody else look at it and see if it makes sense to that person.
Thank you.
And
sure.
I think it's also a good idea for during the peer review, they can color code each other's essay. So, yeah.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining our presentation today.
Yes, thank you so much. Excellent activities.
Yeah, this is great.
Nice, very nice approach.
Thank you
very much.
So if you need any resources, let me post our emails in the chat box. So feel free to contact us. Yeah, so I have posted the emails in the chat box.
I am volunteering right now, and I've been given tomorrow and the next day to do my own lesson plans for a online class of like 10. And this is exactly what we need to go over. So timing is good. Hopefully I won't bother you with any questions.
Oh, anytime, no problem.
Wouldn't be a bother unless it gets past 5 o'clock and that's cocktail hour. And
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting, but Kristen, you really appreciate it once again. And everyone else, thanks for, spending some of your Monday doing this.
Thank you so much for coming,
Take
folks.
care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.